Good evening. Welcome to the Violence in Schools Ad Hoc Committee meeting of November 20th, 2024. This meeting will now come to order. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewa of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Trustee Morton. And now I'm looking for a motion to approve the draft minutes of April 2nd, 2024. Trustee Pinello. And then moving on to information items, this is a report from the Violence in Schools Working Group, and I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Heather Mundy.
Thank you. So this evening, I'm pleased to bring a report through you, Chair, on page 3 to 9 of your agenda item. I also have Lisa Coppins, the Senior Manager of People and Culture, here as well to support this report. So this report provides an update on the activities of the Violence in Schools Working Group. On page 3, it speaks most specifically to the work done since May 1st, 2024. The working group decided that to further the understanding of violence in schools, inviting presentations from specific staff groups would be a good starting point. The working group heard from various staff groups during the May 21st and June 5th meetings. The presentations were conversational in nature and provided anecdotal information that is summarized below in this report. And then you can see there the details, information from those presentations. And then Lisa's going to share some of the reflections from what we heard.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just to highlight a few things that we did hear from these sessions that were outlined, we really heard about the importance of relationships and communication. The fact that collaboration of integrated teams to support complex student needs is really crucial. We also heard about the importance of sharing practices and promising practices from schools that have had success in various areas. And the importance of professional learning on implementation of programming and strategies for all staff, and how that work needs to be ongoing. And then some overarching themes, and just to summarize what we've really taken away of what we've learned. And we can summarize that in a few key points. The term violence in schools has many different understandings based on perspectives, roles, and experience. We also have learned that all parties really care about students and the student experience, and the importance of creating positive school climates for students, staff, and families as well. We learned that it takes all individuals working together in a school to create and sustain a positive school climate. And we did also learn that there are system structures to mitigate and address incidents.
And then as a working group, we really wanted to think about what next. And so on page 6, we have a few things that we would like to suggest for the work of the working group. We would like to request that the working group be extended to June 30th, 2025. We would also like for the Director of Education to consider refining and narrowing the mandate of the working group for that period in time, to help support us truly being able to come back with some specific recommendations, because as expressed before, the topic itself is very broad and can be difficult to get clear focus. And then based on that refinement and narrowing of the mandate for that period of time, to review the composition of the working group, to ensure that it matches and relates with that focus, and that we can consider number of membership as well as those involved. If there is a continuation of the working group, we think it'd be important that once we know that mandate, that we look into research. We also gather more information. We've heard from a number of staff, but we haven't spent much time talking to students or school community. Review and analysis of the climate survey, which will be done in 2025, but that will probably come out later at the end of the school year. Identify and gather information regarding promising practices so that we can share information across the system to support positive school climates for staff, students, and families. And then understand what professional learning or structures we need to support positive student engagement and success at school, that is the goal when we're looking at next steps. So that is our report, and we're happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from trustees? Trustee Morton?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Under what we have learned, you indicated that violence in schools has many different meanings, but to me, violence is violence. So what are those different meanings or learnings that we have?
Thank you. And what we heard through some of the presentations is there was differences at some of the secondary as to whether it was between peers of students, whether it was students with complex needs, whether it was students with communication, whether it was, so there was a lot, I guess, you know, the term violence might be not the right word to say that was different, but there was in different interpretations, and that's what has made it difficult for us to really narrow and be able to say, okay, let's focus directly on this so we can come back with recommendations, because we found there was very varied experiences. And I think that was the request for the working group, to be able to get a clearer focus.
Trustee Miller?
Thank you, Superintendent Mundy. I just wanted to address the comment you made regarding the voices from this report. So I do agree that when I looked it over, it definitely was missing the student voice. Particularly in my community, we've been hearing a lot of parents as well, and the number one issue that's come up of late is bullying. And so with the various forms of bullying, I would like to know, I have a question, or maybe this is just a reflection for consideration, but I was expecting to see actually something around prevention and education in terms of how we are addressing this to our community. So whether that's providing education on the areas, especially bullying, for whether it's trainings, but just education in that regard. Also, because I did mention bullying in the different forms, I would like to understand how that's actually defined across the board, because it will look different in different, whether it's from school to school, or are we thinking about something that will clearly define what that looks like? The next thing I wanted to address was, I did mention about preventative measures, but again, I think what I would like to tap into is how we are engaging our school community on a whole for anti-bullying efforts, because I think that's a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Bullying, so when we started, I wouldn't say that was, it was a topic of conversation. When we worked through the discussions with staff, that as our first initial focus, that wasn't where their focus was, and that's why I think it's so important that the directors support for that next period of time a clear focus for the working group so that we can respond to that focus.
Thank you. And I'm going to go to Trustee Litton online.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just wondering, there's a lot of information due to the amazing work and the conversations that were had at the table, hearing from the educators and representatives. I think sometimes the challenge when we go through these processes is that we try to complete the process in order before we try to, implement anything. So I'm just wondering, from some of the feedback that was received, is there anything that may be implemented or any changes that may be made based on the information that you've heard at this point?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Yes, so with the Safe Schools and the bias-aware progressive discipline, there was some additional information around the school code of conduct that was shared this fall, and looking to Positive School Climates is looking to do additional review of that information and additional training, so that is in progress. Also, another procedure was the risk of injury, mitigating risk of injury procedure, and that has been revised through the course of last year. And also there was training provided for our school administrators, that's still ongoing, and then moving forward with implementation of some new resources related to that. So I think there has been some action items that have come out of our conversations, but likewise looking to really identify a focus so that it can be more concrete in terms of our recommendations and support of this ad hoc committee.
Thank you.
Trustee Pinello.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you so much to both of you for your report and your recommendation. I've made so many notes, and so I hope you'll bear with me here. I want to first start by thanking the working group and both of you and everyone who was a part of this for the work that was done, because we recognize it was a very broad scope, but we knew that the conversation had to start, and so I'm very grateful and pleased with how it's gone thus far. I also need to extend a moment of gratitude to the staff, to the educators, the EAs, the principals, and all the union partners who were part of this, because I acknowledge that they weren't just sharing stories and experiences, but in some cases, very real traumas. And so that is emotional labor that I hope they feel as though will be turned into meaningful action by this board. I appreciate in the chart of what we've learned the mention of COVID, because I think returning this normalization for some of these students who had never experienced what school was like prior to COVID, and some who were maybe too young to remember, I think it's really given us an opportunity to reset and retake in what is the structure within a school setting that we're trying to introduce, and what do those wraparound supports look like, understanding that people are carrying different traumas and experiences back into a very institutionalized space, both as staff and as students. And so I am looking forward to us engaging with families and community members as well, because I know at least in the city of Oshawa, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, there are a group of parents who have been very active in advocating for resources and supports because of what they're seeing and hearing within their schools. And I appreciate that local organizing, because that's what it looks like when school communities care for one another, even if it's not their own firsthand experience. And so I'm eager to hear across the region what other schools are experiencing, and how that is the same, and how it's different, and how it supports what we've already heard from staff. I think this narrowing and extension, I'm in favor of it, because I think it lends itself to our purpose. Now that we've started this work and we've started this conversation, we can build on that, and it can turn into things that we can take to OPSPA, to the province, within the region, within our respective municipalities, as trustees from a governance position, to advocate for more of those in-community wraparound supports, so that when people leave the school environment, they are still getting what they need to be successful and come back the next day in their best, in their best form. And so when Trustee Morton brought up what, violence is violence, I thought there's so many aspects to what that looks like. It can be psychological, we know physical, I think that's the one we hear most about. It can be social, it can be emotional. And because of the breadth and the depth, I very much am looking forward to hearing what community has to say. My last 2 points are just more so for my fellow trustees to keep in mind. One, I agree with what Trustee Linton has said in terms of we don't necessarily need to wait, so I'm very pleased to hear that there's actions being rolled out. I think in the pursuit of perfection, we stall and we sometimes trip ourselves up. And so in the famous words of Nike, sometimes you just have to do it. And so I am thankful to this board who agreed to start this conversation while it was so broad, knowing that we can continue to narrow it down. And I do want us to keep in mind that when we're talking about violence within schools, that of course we keep in mind that it's not necessarily just the actions that we're tackling in these conversations. It is social determinants of health and well-being. It is barriers that people are facing outside of DDSB. But this is a really great way for us to assess how policies and procedures are turning into action, are turning into community engagement and support, and are turning into student success. So thank you so much for your report, and I, of course, will speak in favor of this extension. Thank you, Chair.
Trustee Morton?
Thank you, and through you again. When we talk about absent voices, there are 2 voices that I'm not seeing here that I would like to see. The first one is our mental health lead, Stephanie Pellebor, because years ago we did have a mental health ad hoc committee which grew out of violence in schools ad hoc. And our mental health lead at the time contributed greatly to that working group. So I would like to see Stephanie invited. And I'm also wondering about parents. Parents have voices, and this is something that we could use their voices, we could engage with them. And I highly recommend that we carry on with the working group, by the way.
Superintendent Mundy, do you want to respond?
To say thank you for that feedback, and we'll certainly share that with the director.
Seeing no further questions or comments, I want to thank the working group for bringing forward this report tonight. I do want to thank everyone that participated in the working group. I want to thank staff, everybody who came forward and worked on the group, but also made presentations to the group. I really do feel that it was a space where we had a lot of frank dialogue. I really, as a participant in the working group, learned a lot from what we heard, and I really do appreciate everyone's time and energy that they put into it. It's clear, though, that the work of this committee is ongoing, and I'm talking about the committee now, not the working group. I just want to try and keep the 2 separate. So it's clear that this committee is, the work of the committee is ongoing, and it's not in a position to deliver its final report to the standing committee, and therefore I move that the Violence in Schools Ad Hoc Committee deliver an interim report to the Standing Committee on December 2nd, 2024, confirming that the work remains ongoing and that the mandate of the committee be extended through to December 31st, 2025. Can I have a seconder? Trustee Pinello? All those in favor? If you're on screen, if you're online, you need to raise your hand. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. And seeing as there is no other business on the agenda, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.